Hello, everyone. My name is John Fischer with MassDEP. I'm our Deputy Division Director for Solid Waste. I'm joined here today by Sean Silver, who will be helping me run today's meeting. We also have a number of other DEP staff participating today as well. I do want to mention to begin that we are recording this meeting today so that we can share it with other people who were not able to make the webinar today. A word about how we'll be running the webinar today. We're expecting quite a large turnout today. So what we've done is we've placed participants all on mute, and we'll ask if you have questions or comments you want to raise over the course of the meeting. Please use the chat function in Zoom to do that, and we will be keeping an eye on the chat function as we go. What we'll be doing is I'll be going through a series of slides to begin with, and once I've completed that, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So I have a presentation that should last about 35 minutes or so. So I'll be going through that first, and then we should have plenty of time to take some of your questions at the end. So again, my name is John Fischer. I'm our Deputy Division Director for Solid Waste at MassDEP, and I'll be talking with you here today about Massachusetts Solid Waste Master Plan. So I am going to go ahead and get started here. I'll start with a little bit of background for those who aren't familiar with solid waste in Massachusetts and our solid waste master plan, explain a little bit of the context and some of the data about solid waste management in Massachusetts, and then we'll get into the solid waste master plan in particular. So to start with, what is the solid waste master plan? This plan provides the big picture view for how we will strive to manage our trash in Massachusetts. So this provides our program and policy framework for how we'll manage our waste in Massachusetts. We're required to maintain and update a solid waste master plan for Massachusetts. We do not have a set time frame that we have to adhere to, but we have generally followed 10-year planning cycles. So we just recently published our most recent solid waste master plan. The 2030 solid waste master plan was published in October. And this plan runs through 2030, although it really provides a policy framework for how we'll be striving to manage our waste well beyond 2030. So when we talk about solid waste in Massachusetts, what do we mean? So there's a couple things that fall into this category, big picture. First, we're talking about all of the waste that we generate in our homes and businesses on a regular, ongoing basis. So everything that we throw out as trash over the course of the year, and then also waste from construction and demolition projects. And when we gather our solid waste data, and when we count our solid waste, we're counting all of the solid waste that we generate, whether it's disposed of in-state or out-of-state. And what that amounts to is about 5.5 million tons a year of trash, counting everything from all of our residents, businesses, and institutions. So it comes out to a little bit under 1 ton per person per year. Again, averaging all of that over the course of a full year, all of our residential and business waste. Where does our trash go? So in state, we dispose of almost 4 million tons of trash a year. So we have 7 municipal waste combustors or waste to energy facilities, and they take about 3 million tons of waste on an annual basis. And then as of 2019, we had 5 active solid waste landfills that disposed of a little under 1 million tons per year. And then on a net basis, we dispose of about 1.5 million tons of waste that is going out of state for disposal. So to explain that, we have waste routinely move across state boundaries, and state governments generally do not determine that. That's determined largely by the private sector that manages solid waste facilities. In terms of where waste goes for disposal, it's really a market dynamic. And so waste comes into Massachusetts from sources in other states, and then we send waste from Massachusetts sources to facilities out of state for disposal. So on a net basis, we have about 1.5 million tons more going out than coming in. We do have about 200 solid waste transfer stations in Massachusetts. Many of those are small municipal transfer stations that serve their own residents. When we look at where that waste goes, the states that receive the most waste from Massachusetts typically include Ohio, New Hampshire, New York, and South Carolina. We also have a lot of other important facilities that are part of our waste management infrastructure in Massachusetts. And I should clarify that that data I just showed for solid waste disposal shows the amount of trash that we're disposing of. So that does not show everything that we're recycling or composting or reusing or otherwise diverting from the trash. So there are a lot of other important facilities that help us to do that. So help us to process our waste materials and handle them in ways so that they do not need to be disposed of as trash. So that includes about 30 sorting and transfer facilities for construction and demolition materials. We have 9 of what we call material recovery facilities for mixed recyclables. Those are our bottles and cans and paper and cardboard. And they take those recyclables and process and sort them and bale them and ship them off to end markets. We have about 200 compost operations of various types and sizes. Some of those include compost operations that manage food scraps. We also have several other types of facilities that take food scraps, including anaerobic digestion facilities that generate methane and capture that to produce energy, as well as farms that feed food scraps to animals. Also in Massachusetts, we have a really wide, extensive network of reuse and donation programs, both in terms of food rescue for fresh and perishable foods, along with our food banks that distribute food to those in need. And we also have a growing network of reuse and donation programs for things like household goods and furniture and building materials. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So another important point of information is when we look at that 5.5 million tons or so of trash that we dispose of each year, what is it? So when we look at our municipal solid waste, which is just our regular trash from households and businesses, so some of the materials that make up the most of that trash include food waste. That's the largest single material that we dispose of. We also throw out quite a bit of paper, including cardboard and plastics. And then construction and demolition materials. These are the construction and demolition materials that are in our regular household and business trash. So there's also quite a bit more of construction and demolition materials that are generated and managed separately. So those are things like wood and metal, asphalt, brick and concrete, gypsum wallboard, things like that, that go through dedicated construction and demolition debris handling facilities. But this is really important data because when we think about how are we going to reduce the waste that we dispose of, we need to understand what the opportunities are. We need to understand what the waste is and which of these materials do we really have some good opportunity to try to get out of our trash and divert to higher and better uses. In our solid waste master plan, one of the pieces of the plan is an appendix at the end of the plan that takes waste characterization data and estimates our current disposal of about 60 material categories. And then looks at, based on the type of material and its ability to be recycled and composted, as well as collected separately, looks at, what we think is the realistic additional diversion potential over the next 9 years or so, between now and 2030. And this chart shows the materials that we believe are the top 5 target materials from a pure tonnage standpoint. So when we look at the waste that we're disposing of, these are the materials that we think have the greatest additional diversion potential. So at the top of the list is food materials, where we believe 500,000 tons per year or more could be diverted from disposal, in addition to what's already being captured. Cardboard is a readily recyclable material, and we believe there's at least 200,000 tons more of cardboard that could be readily captured. And then, 3 other material categories that we believe are particularly significant include untreated wood. So that's things like lumber and pallets, textiles, that's clothing and linens and towels and things of that nature. And then bulky materials, which is, in particular furniture, which may not provide a lot of great recycling opportunity, but where there may be some great, repair or reuse options for that material category. So looking at those material categories and additional diversion potential helps inform our planning to set waste reduction goals for the state. So when we look at the Solid Waste Master Plan and we look at the statute that dictates the plan, one of the primary goals is that we ensure adequate capacity to manage our waste. And when we think about that, we try to take a broad view of that. That does not necessarily mean that we have to have disposal capacity for all of our waste. And we believe oftentimes the better capacity solution is to put management infrastructure in place that will enable us to reduce the amount of waste that we dispose of and reduce the amount of capacity that we need. It's quite difficult and problematic to site disposal facilities in a state like Massachusetts, where we are relatively densely populated, do not have a lot of wide open spaces, and it's difficult to find locations for disposal facilities here in state. So while we remain open to citing additional disposal capacity in certain circumstances where it's needed, when we look at our solid waste master plan, what we try to do most and to the greatest degree is reduce the amount of waste that we're going to ultimately need to dispose of. And so we have a goal for 2030 to reduce our disposal by 30%. So that's about a 1.7 million ton reduction on an annual basis. And then our longer term goal is to reduce our disposal by 90% by 2050, which we believe essentially equates to a zero waste future for Massachusetts. I spoke a little bit about our view of management capacity and all the different ways that we can manage the materials that are entering our waste stream. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this chart. You're welcome to look at it more when we post the presentation following today's webinar. But this gives you an idea about all the different types of capacity we have in Massachusetts and all the different opportunities to grow our capacity to manage material in a lot of different ways and in ways that do not necessarily require disposal. So going from the bottom, this includes sections of these bars include waste to energy capacity and landfills. Then this purple bar is transfer capacity to move waste to other places. The blue section is that transfer capacity specifically for construction materials. The orange is our material recovery facilities to process recyclables. That is processing capacity for construction and demolition materials. And then at the top, we have our capacity for composting, anaerobic digestion, animal feed, and reuse. So it just gives you an idea of all the different forms of capacity and all the different ways we can manage materials that might otherwise become waste materials. Another important point to understand is why is reducing disposal important? Why is that our preference and why do we care about that? And there's two different sets of reasons for why that's important. And I'm not going to go into great detail on either, but just from a very big picture standpoint, reducing disposal from a life cycle perspective is very important in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. When you look at if we were to achieve our 2030 goal, that would reduce about 1.7 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent on an annual basis. When we recycle and capture materials and use them in productive ways, that conserves both resources and energy, which is part of what contributes to that greenhouse gas reduction. So there's an opportunity to really conserve resources from a big picture standpoint. And then when we do this, we reduce our need for disposal facilities and reduce the pressure on existing disposal facilities, which are very limited both in Massachusetts and throughout the Northeast United States. Then reducing disposal and capturing these materials and using them in better ways is also important from an economic standpoint. So all these different ways of capturing and using materials, from reuse to recycling to composting and so forth, contribute to business development and job creation. And when we can do that here in Massachusetts, that's especially valuable for us as a state. We had a study done back in 2016 that showed that at that time, food waste reduction alone supported about 1,000 jobs in Massachusetts and showed signs of continuing to grow since then. We've also had a study done looking at our reuse economy that shows that's a greater than $7 billion annual industry in Massachusetts taken together with more than 6,000 businesses. So capturing these materials, avoiding disposal is important both from an economic standpoint and an environmental standpoint for Massachusetts. So when we work on a document and a plan like the master plan, it's really important to think about what we at MassDEP can do effectively and what we really can't do that's really not within our purview. So I'm going to take a couple slides just to take a moment to explain what we do and what we do not do and what other entities in Massachusetts do. So our set of activities is really spread across these 5 areas. So we develop regulations and policies that implement the statutory authority that we're given by the legislature. We conduct facility permitting, so all the facilities that are managing our waste that I talked about in earlier slides, we permit and oversee those facilities and make sure they meet our permitting requirements. Then we conduct inspections to ensure compliance, and where we see non-compliance, we conduct enforcement actions to bring facilities back into compliance. We run a range of grant and assistance programs, both for municipalities and for businesses. And then we conduct a number of different education and outreach programs. And I'll talk about some of these areas a little bit more in some of our later slides. A couple of things that we do not do as an agency: we do not generally develop, plan, or operate specific facilities or collection programs, and that is generally done either by the private sector or by local governments in Massachusetts. And a second thing that we do not do is develop specific legislation. So that's the purview of the legislature to do that. And while we may have some thoughts around legislative policy that we do look forward to sharing through the years, our focus is really to implement the laws that give us authority and obligations to implement. So that's really our focus, is everything on that prior slide to implement the statutory authority and obligations that we have as an agency. So now I'm going to actually get into the solid waste master plan. I will go over what I see as some of the key elements and priorities in the plan. I am not going to touch on everything that's in the plan. There are a number of action items in there, and I won't be able to cover everything in this presentation here today, but I'll give you a taste of what I think are some of the most important aspects of the master plan. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll provide some slides and links for more information, including links to the plan itself, where you can look at it at a later date following our webinar here. So one thing just to mention, big picture, this plan is written at a high level. It is not an extensively detailed plan. It's intended to provide a broad framework that we can implement over a 10-year period. And I'll talk about, our approach to implementing the plan in a moment. The plan is divided into 7 primary substantive sections. We talk about first, source reduction and reuse. So what we can do to prevent waste or extend lifetimes of products and packaging. We have a section on food waste reduction, a section on residential waste reduction that focuses primarily on work through cities and towns. We have a section of the plan focused on commercial waste reduction from businesses and institutions. Then we talk about reducing waste from construction and demolition materials. We have a section on market development. And then finally, a section on solid waste facility oversight. So, I mentioned that the plan provides a broad, big picture framework for how we're going to strive to manage the waste that we generate. In a number of cases, we have developed and will be further developing what we call action plans that will help us along the way kind of be more nimble and flexible about how we implement the master plan. One thing we've learned through the years is that 10 years is a long time, and a lot changes over the course of a master planning period. And so what we've done is we've taken the approach of maintaining our overall master plan and then developing more specific action plans for particular priority areas, and then working with subcommittees and work groups that we've developed to update and implement those action plans over time. And some of the areas where we either have already done that or will be doing that include organics, which is focused on food waste in particular, construction and demolition materials. We have not yet begun, but will soon be launching a recycling market development work group. And then we've had a very extensive series of discussions on reduce and reuse over the course of the past couple of years. So we work to develop all of these action plans through these subcommittees and work groups. And then we'll also be developing and conducting a midway program review in 2025 to check in, see how the master plan looks in 2025, assess our progress, and reassess whether we think there's anything really significant in the plan that needs to be changed at that time. But otherwise, we're really trying to work with the plan as a big picture framework, and then develop and implement more specific plans along the way to adapt our programs as we go. So now I'm going to talk about some of the highlights in the 2030 plan, with an emphasis on some of the things that I think are really significant in terms of new components, either new or expanded components in the 2030 plan compared with our plans from prior cycles. So one thing is an increased emphasis on reduce and reuse. We've been meeting very actively with our reduce and reuse work group over the past couple of years. They've worked with us to develop a draft reduce and reuse action plan. We expect to be publishing a revised version of that action plan soon, and then working on implementing that. So when we talk about reduce and reuse, some of the types of things we're talking about are extending the lifetime of products, things like durable materials like furniture. The picture on the right is a Habitat for Humanity restore location. I believe this is the one in Ashland, but there are a number of these around Massachusetts where things like furniture and building materials can be resold, and where we can extend the use of those products rather than throwing them out initially. There's also opportunities to build our repair infrastructure and capabilities for durable products, things like appliances. We've also looked at program strategies where different products can be shared locally. For example, things like power tools, where you may need, something just, for a couple of days, but you don't necessarily need to buy it. So, maybe there are opportunities to develop local sharing initiatives that can reduce the amount of products that people need to buy. And then, just reducing or limiting or preventing material use to begin with. So if we can look at reducing use of certain single-use packaging, replace that with more durable, reusable packaging, then we can, prevent waste right up front by reducing the amount of packaging that we generate. Another big area of emphasis in our 2030 plan is better engagement with and support of environmental justice communities. And this is a focus of our solid waste master plan, but it also runs through all of MassDEP's programs and policies. This is something that's being reassessed across the board. And when we talk about environmental justice communities, we mean communities with certain defined characteristics in terms of either lower income populations, higher minority populations, or higher non-English speaking households, or households with limited English proficiency. And our focus in the master plan is how we can provide more support to those communities. Many of those communities have been historically disproportionately affected by waste facilities, as well as other sources of pollution. And we're looking to see how we can better engage with and support those communities in the world of solid waste and recycling and waste reduction. So some of the ways we're looking to do that is changing our grant program criteria to prioritize those communities for grant awards, either large awards or just being preferred to be selected for an award to begin with. We are implementing an initiative where we can provide more assistance to start or improve composting programs at community gardens, particularly in urban settings. We believe there are opportunities to leverage MassDEP's illegal disposal surveillance program, known as Candid Camera, focused on reducing and preventing illegal dumping. We have elsewhere through MassDEP's programs, grant programs for hybrid or electric vehicles, and we'd like to try to get some of those grant opportunities connected with trash and recycling collection vehicles that service environmental justice communities. And then throughout our permitting, we are either have established or in the process of establishing improved notice and public engagement opportunities for permitting facilities in environmental justice communities. Another section of the 2030 plan where we've really tried to ramp up our efforts is relative to building more local markets for our recyclables. That may not work for all materials, but we believe there are certain materials where there are really great opportunities to build local markets for those materials, get them managed close to home, and as I mentioned earlier, keep some of the business development and job creation benefits associated with those recycling markets here in Massachusetts. One example of a material where we think there are opportunities like that is glass. The picture on the right is a local government glass recycling operation. It was partially supported by a MassDEP grant. I think this one is in the town of Dennis, although we've given a similar grant to the town of Groton. We've also given grants to several businesses that are ramping up glass recycling operations. So recycling market development is not new for us, but we're looking to really ramp that up within the context of the 2030 plan. So in January, we'll be launching a recycling market development work group that'll be working with us to help us develop a comprehensive market development action plan that will help support fostering some of these markets here in Massachusetts. We also will be working with other state agencies to launch a state agency recycling market development council that will look at how we can support recycling markets through our state agency purchasing. So we have some particular materials in mind there, but we'll be taking an open look at how our own purchasing can help support our in-state recycling operations. And then in 2022, we'll be developing, refining, and launching what we're calling a waste reduction and recycling innovations grant program. So that'll be launched with a $1 million investment, but we hope to grow that program over time and look for some really new innovations for the way we approach waste reduction and prevention and recycling programs to really try to change our infrastructure to further ramp up our progress across all these areas. Another really important part of what we do in Massachusetts, and this could be a presentation unto itself, we have what we call waste disposal bans for many recyclable and compostable materials. So we have a list of materials that are banned from disposal in Massachusetts. And what we do to monitor compliance with those waste bans is we go out and we conduct inspections at solid waste facilities, whether it be a landfill, a municipal waste combustion facility, or a waste transfer station. We look to identify loads that have large amounts of these banned materials and then take enforcement action against the business or institution that disposed of that material in the trash. So some examples where we've done quite a bit of enforcement include things like cardboard and food material, among others. So in our 2030 plan, and actually concurrent with publishing the 2030 plan, we published new regulations, revised waste bin regulations that add several waste bin materials effective November of 2022. So those new materials include mattresses and textiles, which is things, again, like clothing and sheets, linens, towels, things like that. And then we also have an existing ban on commercial food materials that currently applies to any business that disposes 1 ton or more per week of that material. And also in November of 2022, that threshold will drop from 1 ton to 1/2 ton per week. And we expect this will roughly double the number of businesses that are subject to that ban and need to take steps to reduce their disposal of food material. We've also been working really hard over the past couple of years to implement what we're calling a minimum performance standard for facilities that receive and handle construction and demolition materials. This is working to establish a clear and solid level playing field for all of these facilities that also ensures that construction materials that are banned from disposal are being diverted from the trash at a high rate and in a way that is fair to all these facilities and ensures a fair and level playing field across the industry. So we've been working quite a bit on that over the past couple of years, and we'll be continuing to work on moving that forward over the next several years. How can you make a difference and get involved just in your own life? So there are a number of things you can do, and this is a very short list. But one thing I want to highlight is a program we have called Recycle Smart MA. So this is a program website that you can visit, and you can learn about how to recycle more effectively, whether it's in your home or in your business. And this website will tell you what materials you should place in your recycling bin and which should not. And if you're an organization like a municipality or a business, we also encourage you to sign up as what we call a Recycle Smart partner to help share the word and spread the word about this information and guidance. So if you're not already familiar with that, take a look at Recycle Smart MA. Also, if you have the ability and the space and the interest, composting at home is a really great way to reduce your waste and to reduce your impact. And you don't even need to have your material collected to do that. So you can compost leaves and yard waste and a lot of your food material right in your own yard. So if you have the space to do that and you have the willingness to do that, that's a really great way to reduce your impact. And then, also generate compost that you can use in your own garden or yard. If you haven't already and you're interested, MassDEP maintains a list of a number of advisory committees and we meet fairly regularly with those committees. And if you're interested, this provides the web link for how you can learn about those committees and their meetings and attend if you're interested. All of those meetings are open to the public. These days, they are all being held remotely via Zoom or similar platforms. And you're welcome to go and check out the website, and you can either participate live in those advisory committees, or you can just track what we're doing by tracking our presentations and meeting notes. I also encourage you, if you're interested, to get involved with your local solid waste or recycling program. Many cities and towns maintain either solid waste or recycling or sustainability committees, or have volunteer opportunities, and there may be really good ways to get involved at the local level. And then if you're looking at what to do through work, and if you're looking for assistance for a business or institution, we have a program called Recycling Works in Massachusetts. It's a really great program that provides a lot of free assistance and resources and guidance to help businesses and institutions recycle, compost, or reduce waste more effectively. So if you're looking to see what you can do in your workplace, check out recyclingworksma.com. There's assistance available by email, by phone, through the website, or they even offer in-person one-on-one technical assistance to businesses. So it's a great program to take advantage of. Here are some links where you can access all of this information and learn more. We will be posting this presentation following the conclusion of the webinar today, so we'll get this up on our website shortly, and we'll share it out to people. And you can check out these links to learn more about any of our programs across these areas. That includes the link to where you can find the Solid Waste Master Plan. We can access our Recycle Smart MA program. The business assistance link here is for our Recycling Works Massachusetts program. And then I provided the link where you can learn more about our grant and loan programs, whether those be for cities and towns or for businesses. And then if you have questions and you're not sure who to contact at MassDEP, we have this general email address where you can reach out to us, dep.swmp@mass.gov. And, if you're not sure who to contact at MassDEP, you're welcome to contact us there. We'll get the question directed to the right person and get you more information. So with that, that is the end of my presentation and the end of my slides. So we have about 15 to 20 minutes here where I'm happy to take any questions that people may have. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if you have questions, please type those into the chat function, and we will go through the chat and take a look at those and do the best we can to answer your questions.
John, I did see a question from Amy Spear about the links in those slides, and I think you alluded to that. We are going to post those on the MassDEP website. Where specifically, John, are we going to put it on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee page, somewhere else?
I believe we'll be posting it on our Solid Waste Master Plan webpage. We do have the email addresses of everyone who registered. So we'll get those email addresses together to let you know once that's available and provide the link where you can access this.
Great. And yeah, once you have the, if you want to, you can go into the presentation and click the links there, and you can get everything you need. I do have a couple other questions that have rolled in, so if you're ready to fire away on these, John.
Absolutely.
First is from Sarah James. She says, "This looks good, but I don't hear anything about hazardous waste or electronic waste, which, although a small piece of the solid waste pie, has very highly toxic materials in it."
Yes, that's a good point and a good question. We do talk. So there's two things to say about that. One, when we're talking about hazardous waste from businesses, that is outside the scope of this plan. So that falls under the realm of our hazardous waste management programs, and that's not part of the solid waste master plan. But when we're talking about materials from residents that are entering our solid waste stream, then that is part of the master plan. And we do talk about that in a number of sections of the plan, including efforts to better manage electronics, as well as improve household hazardous waste programs. So you're correct, that's a good point. And we do talk in the plan about initiatives to not just reduce the amount of waste we dispose of, but also reduce the toxicity of the waste stream. So that is an important point, and we do work to try to address that as well.
Great, thanks, John. Another question I have is from Carly Thibodeau, who says, apologies if I missed it, but were there any metrics on how much power the waste energy facilities produce for the state?
I did not mention that. We do have that information. I do not actually know the answer to that off the top of my head, but we could follow up and provide that.
Okay. Let me just pop this out here. Apologies. My computer's fighting me a little bit right now, which is nice. All right, there we go. Okay. This one from Gina McNeil. Can you explain how the additional diversion estimates were determined for the top 5 target materials? i.e., why does MassDEP think another 570,000 pounds of food waste can be diverted?
Sure. So what we did is we looked through actually 60, or I think it's actually 62 different material categories. And, first began with assessing what we believe is currently disposed of based on waste characterization data specific to Massachusetts. And then, basically established different percentage levels for individual material categories. So it's not an exact science, but we looked at different material categories, and they're just by the nature of the material, is it something that's readily recyclable or compostable? And then in a way that it's generated and managed, how challenging is it to get collected and managed separately? And so we developed, I think we set basically 5 different percentage levels, and we assigned each material one of those 5 different levels for additional diversion potential. So this is not necessarily like the absolute maximum technical diversion potential. That would be significantly higher for many of these materials, but it's the amount that we feel, given the infrastructure needs it takes to get all that material collected and managed separately, this is the levels we feel are realistic within this planning period through 2030.
Great. Here's one from Michael Campanelle. He says, does MassDEP plan to implement its own environmental justice protocols in the solid waste context, or will it rely on the EJ protocols implemented in other contexts, for example, MEPA's EJ protocols?
So that will vary by program. We, relative to facilities that fall under MEPA, so that's the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, we'll be, to the extent those are solid waste facilities going through MEPA, they'll be held to those standards. But then we're also looking at our own regulations. One of the things that I did not mention in my presentation, that over the course of the next year, we're going through kind of a complete review of our solid waste regulations and doing a refreshing and updating of those regulations. So among other things, we're going to look at the requirements in those regulations and make changes relative to environmental justice. And that will be following kind of the Secretariat's overall approach relative to environmental justice, and then making sure our regulations are in alignment with that. And then some of what we're doing around environmental justice is different and independent of that. For example, we're looking at each of our grant programs and looking at our outreach, our evaluation, and our selection criteria to make sure that we're delivering high levels of grant resources to environmental justice communities.
Next one is from Wendy Millar-Page, who says, are there plans to help municipalities establish mattress and textile programs?
Yes, there are. MassDEP does have a mattress recycling grant program. We've given grants to a number of cities and towns to help them start up mattress recycling programs. And we'll be looking at probably continuing that for some amount of time in our at least in our next grant cycle. We also, relative to mattresses, have a statewide contract for mattresses, where we have 4 vendors on state contract that provide mattress recycling services, and any public entity can purchase off of that contract at the state contract prices. We'll be taking a look at that contract soon, and potentially expanding it to potentially include additional vendors. We also have one of the grant programs we have for cities and towns is a program called the Recycling Dividends Program, where we provide a little bit over $3 million a year in funding. This program provides essentially cash payments to cities and towns, not literally, but actual, financial payments to cities and towns if they meet certain program criteria. And then those funds can in turn be reinvested in their recycling programs, including things like mattress recycling. So those are some of the ways with mattresses. Textiles, we've been really working more to provide guidance to municipalities about different textile recovery programs. Municipalities that set up textile programs, often that's a great opportunity to reduce disposal costs and save money. Textiles do, on balance, have value. And if you establish textile recovery programs, you can actually not only reduce your disposal costs, but actually receive some money back from those materials. I know in my town, they have a great program with textile collection bins placed at schools, and schools actually get payments for every ton of textiles that are collected through the bin placed at that school. So there are a lot of great opportunities for municipalities to work with other organizations, other textile recovery organizations, to set up programs and reduce disposal at the same time that they can save money on their programs.
Okay, I'm going to combine a question here just for efficiency's sake. So thank you to Carol and Kathy for asking these questions. The first is, why do we import waste from other states? And the second part of that is, what kinds of waste are we receiving and what's done with it?
So that's a good question. So when we say we import waste, that's a bit of a misnomer. So MassDEP nor any state really determines specifically where a specific load of waste goes. So waste is, collected and managed either by local governments or largely by privately operated facilities. And those facilities make their own arrangements to determine where they're going to send waste materials. And that's a function of the private marketplace and who has facilities and business relationships where. And for example, a transfer station in Massachusetts could elect to send that waste to a disposal facility in Massachusetts, or it could go to a disposal facility in another state. And so, its waste is really managed in this regional marketplace. It's not so much managed within state boundaries. So waste routinely crosses state boundaries on a daily basis. And, so sometimes it goes from other state collected in other facilities and comes to Massachusetts. And Sometimes it's collected in Massachusetts and goes to other states. So that happens routinely every day. It's just the nature of the business. On a net basis, we do have more waste going out of Massachusetts than coming in. And as far as what type of waste, what I'm talking about here is generally household and business trash. So just our regular solid waste that we're talking about.
And next one is from Joe Cosgrove. How can I get data on businesses in reuse and recycling in our city or region?
So there is, if you go to our website and you search on reduce and reuse, that will bring you to the page of our reduce and reuse work group. And you can learn more about that work group in general and find the past work group meeting notes and materials and information. But among other things, we also have a study that was conducted for us by a group from the Tufts University, and was an assessment of the reuse economy in Massachusetts. So from a big picture standpoint, you can take a look at that. Another tool that you can use to identify potential reuse opportunities in your own community is a program we have called Beyond the Bin, which is a searchable resource up on our website. So if you Google MassDEP Beyond the Bin, you can do geography-based searches for different materials that are managed outside of your traditional recycling bin, and a lot of that includes reuse options. So those are a couple of resources that may be helpful.
Thanks, John. And we have two left, just to kind of give you an idea. At least right now, we have two remaining questions. So the first one is from Christina Green, and she says, according to one of your initial slides, about 40% of the current solid waste includes current waistband items. How will enforcement be increased to reduce this?
Sure. So yes, that's definitely true that some of the materials in the waste stream are subject to the waistbands now, and you know, we're looking to continue to conduct inspections and identify, you know, loads with large amounts of materials to get them diverted. I should maybe, you know, take another minute or two to talk about the way we do waistband enforcement. So when we're doing these inspections, we're looking for loads that have, you know, a significant quantity of banned material that we're going to take enforcement on. You know, every load probably has something, has a piece of paper, has a water bottle, soda bottle, something like that. That's not where we're focused with waistband enforcement. We're focused on identifying the loads where we're seeing a significant quantity of banned material, and then working to conduct enforcement against the business where that came from, and get the material going forward separated for recycling. One thing that's interesting to note is that a lot of businesses that receive waistband enforcement from us actually do have a recycling program for the material that wound up in their trash. So it's oftentimes not that they're not recycling it at all, but that, you know, they've just lost their focus at that business about getting the right material placed in the right bin. And that really just takes an ongoing effort for all of us to ensure that the right material is being placed in the right bin. We, like many things over the course of COVID, our waistband inspections got thrown off track, and we actually temporarily suspended inspections for a period of time from a health and safety perspective. We are getting back out there and ramping up inspections now. We're looking to add staff capabilities to do more inspections as we go, to ramp up our inspection presence. And then we're also looking to approach compliance in other ways. So inspections and enforcement are one way to get compliance. We also realize that in other cases, just simply raising awareness, conducting more outreach about waistbands can also help to improve compliance. And one of the ways we're looking to do that is to send, in some cases, formal request for information letters to businesses where we have information suggests they may be disposing of banned material or may not have a recycling program, to get responses from them to ensure that they're being compliant going forward. So also looking to broaden out our enforcement and compliance toolbox a little bit to to use all the different information we have at our disposal and all the different pathways to try to improve compliance. And sometimes that may be enforcement, but other times we may get compliance in other ways that may actually be more efficient and more effective in the big picture view.
Thanks. This may be more of a municipal question, but just to put it out there, is from Wendy Millar Page. It would be fantastic to find a way to offer individual households a tax incentive to utilize compost pickup services. Has this been proposed?
As far as I know, it has not. No, I'm not aware of that being proposed. I think one thought on a somewhat different but related vein is one of the programs we do encourage quite a bit at the municipal level is pay-as-you-throw programs, where residents do pay for their trash disposal on a unit or volume basis. And that certainly does provide a direct incentive to go all these other routes. We also are working with cities and towns, some of whom have worked with vendors to establish, preferred pricing or service terms for their residents. So, not quite the same as a tax incentive or tax credit, but a way to try to, reduce the cost of food waste collection. So we're continuing to work with cities and towns to try to find, what are the best models for residential food waste and try to get, those programs implemented more broadly going forward.
A couple of other questions that have just rolled in.
Okay.
So one is in the legislative strategies section of the master plan, MassDEP will work with the Zero Waste Caucus and stakeholders to advance EPR systems for paint, mattresses, electronics, etc. Can you speak to the effort currently and what you see happening in the remainder of this legislative session?
Yeah, so what we are doing, and we did this, beginning as part of our solid waste master plan rollout at the end of October, and we'll be continuing to work on this, is working through our legislative liaison to, connect with legislators in a couple ways. One, to just, share information with them about the solid waste master plan. I believe we'll be having a briefing at some point. I don't know exactly when that'll be. But to let them know our program framework and our priorities and share that information with them. That's also an opportunity for us to provide guidance on, what maybe are some approaches may be better than others. We can provide our perspective on that. And that'll be, coordinated through, we have a legislative liaison at MassDEP who coordinates our work with the legislature and with legislative groups. So we'll be working through them. I don't know specific meetings and specific dates at this point, but that's the goal, is just to try to engage in more extensive and robust information sharing and discussions, and make sure that we can have our perspective and our information considered in a legislative context.
Thank you. This is a two-parter, I guess. One of the charts showed that waste to energy would be flat, I guess, in terms of the amount of tonnage combusted over the period of time here that we're considering. But there's pressure to close some of these as they are in EJ communities. Also, I think ash landfills may be closing, says Alan Gordon. He says, does the plan anticipate a drop in waste to energy?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's certainly the possibility that some existing waste to energy facilities in the state will close between now and 2030. We do not, have specific information or specific closure dates for, any particular facility. So we have not worked that into the plan. There are two other provisions in the plan related to disposal capacity and related to this question. So one is that statewide, we have a what we call a moratorium on additional waste to energy capacity. So we would not permit additional what we call traditional mass burn combustion capacity beyond what we have now, we do, given the disposal capacity needs in the state, along with the declining landfill capacity, we do have a provision where if a facility were to close, we would allow the permitting of that capacity somewhere else up to the same amount. So up to the same overall amount could potentially be permitted again. And then we do have, which does not show up anywhere in our capacity projections, but we do have the potential to permit up to 350,000 tons per year of additional waste to energy capacity in some other form of waste to energy, some more innovative or improved form of waste to energy. We can potentially permit up to 350,000 tons per year of that type of capacity. As of yet, that's not a new provision that was in our existing master plan and has been continued. As of yet, we have not had anything like that come into us for permitting. So there's nothing shown there in any of our disposal capacity projections, but there is the potential to permit some capacity in that category at some point. So that's kind of where we're at with the waste to energy capacity. But it is quite possible that some of that capacity will close and that could decline from the current amount.
I think we've gotten more questions after 1 o'clock than during the actual period from between 12 and 1. Just a clarification from Janine Bishop of MassDEP. This is on that curbside organics sort of idea. There was a question about a tax incentive. If you're familiar with the recycling dividends program, if you're a municipal recycling manager or something like that, you probably would be. Janine says we did add a point to the organics criteria for the recycling dividends program for municipalities that have selected an organics collection vendor through a public procurement process and that publicize the vendor to residents who can opt in through a fee for service through a negotiated price. So it's a mouthful to say, but basically, if you've taken those steps as a municipality and done something that could probably help your the townspeople, you would be able to get an extra point in your recycling dividends program under the organic section next year. So thank you, Janine, for that. And on the subject of waste to energy and disposal technologies, there was a question from David Wasilewski. How are new technologies, for example, waste to hydrogen, incorporated in the master plan going forward? Are state grants available to encourage utilization of new technologies?
So I can't comment on that technology in particular, but that was the type of thing we had in mind, that there may be different technologies that could more effectively manage the waste. And that was the type of thing conceptually we were considering and wanted to remain open to, and allowing that potential 350,000 tons per year of limited additional capacity. Relative to grants, at this point, MassDEP does not offer grants for facilities that are solid waste facilities. All of our grants are focused on facilities that are managing separate recyclable or compostable materials outside of the solid waste stream. That's something that could potentially be part of our new innovations grant program. That's still to be determined. And then the other thing to mention is that outside of the scope of DEP, Massachusetts has a lot of other business development programs where people may be able to take advantage of those programs that aren't specific to waste and recycling per se, but just through organizations such as Mass Development that help support business growth in the state.
Great. And the last one that I have for now is Christina Green. Will the food waste ban apply to public schools? And I think our answer here is yes, that you're looking at the campus. You're not looking at each individual kitchen. And if a place has multiple campuses, then those will be considered separately. And I remember from a previous presentation, John, you said that it's not a real large number of public schools who would meet that half-ton threshold.
Right. So we do, based on the data we have, we do believe it's a relatively small number, like in the order of 20 to 30. One of the resources available through our Recycling Works in Massachusetts program, that's the business assistance link on the slide we have now, is a tool to estimate food waste by sector. So for various categories of businesses and institutions, you can look at certain metrics and come up with, a ballpark estimate of how much food waste you might generate at that size and type of facility, recognizing that there are a lot of variables and it can vary from those estimates. So that's a tool that might be helpful. But yes, in general, it's determined per separate location. So not as a school district as a whole, but each school taken separately, whether that location disposes of amounts over the threshold.
Okay, thank you, John. And that concludes all the questions I received via the chat. I mean, I'm sure we're open to receiving more if people have them. We're easy to find. we're
Yeah,
we can be found online, call, email, whatever.
yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned, we'll be sharing out the slides from today to everyone who registered. I know not everyone who registered participated, so we'll get that out to everyone who expressed an interest in this webinar. We do have our general email address that we provided up on this slide. But you're welcome to also reach out to specific people at MassDEP as appropriate. We generally have specific program contacts on each of our program web pages where you can contact relative to questions about that program area. And just a general kind of point of guidance about the DEP website. It is if you just try to navigate around the site, it does not work well in that way. But if you try to search for program information on the site, it generally works pretty effectively. So if you're looking for program information on the DEP website, generally the search function is essentially a Google search function, works pretty effectively to get you to the right place. But if you're not finding something that you're looking for, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to get you pointed in the right direction. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us today. I think we had a great turnout, and we're really looking forward to implementing this plan now, and happy to talk with anyone more along the way.
All right, John, thanks.
Anything else from you, Sean?
Nope, I think that's it. Good job navigating that. A lot of people have a lot of questions about this stuff, so we're here to answer those for you.
Absolutely. So, okay, well, with that, we will say thank you for joining us today, and we'll be ending the webinar now. We look forward to working with you along the way. Thank you, and hope you have a good day, and happy Thanksgiving.